Hello world, it's Big City Gardener here. Today we're going to talk about container gardening. More specifically, we're going to talk about planting citrus trees and even avocado trees in containers. We're going to touch on the four most important topics when it comes to container gardening: drainage, potting medium, proper plant placement, and fertilization. So whenever we're planting a tree in a container, you want to make sure that you get a good sized container, right? What you find out is the size of the container actually dictates the final size of the tree. Small container, small tree. Bigger container, tree has more space for the roots to grow and for the tree to flourish. Today we're going to be planting in these half wine barrels. If you notice in these pots, there are no holes. So if we were to put our tree in here now with our potting mix, what would end up happening is the water would have no way to escape the pot. We would end up drowning out the roots and killing the tree. So the first and most important thing is to make sure you have adequate drainage in your pot. There is no right or wrong way to put holes in your pot, okay? So you can put 3 to 5, you can put 10, it doesn't really matter. All that matters is that the holes are relatively large so that the water can easily flow out of the container. The next thing we're going to talk about is the actual planting medium. This right here is Coco coir. It starts off as a brick, compressed down, you add some water to it, and it expands into this. Whenever you're expanding the Coco coir block, you don't have to use a wheelbarrow. Any container that can hold a few gallons of water will work just fine. So, whenever I plant citrus trees, or really whenever I plant almost anything in containers, I use a mix between 3 to 4 things. The first thing I start with is Coco coir. Then I add good potting soil, I add good garden soil, and then I come back with compost. Now it's time to add the rest of our ingredients to make our citrus soil potting mix. So I find it easier as I add one bag to mix everything together to make sure that I get everything fully incorporated. So at the end, there's less mixing to do. So here we go. So now you can see we have everything mixed together, all of our different components. We got our Coco coir here that improves the drainage in the pots. We have our potting mix, we have our in-ground soil, and we have our compost. There's no right or wrong mix when it comes to container gardening. You just kind of come up with what works for you. I know some people, they add gravel. I know some people, they add a lot of perlite. Me, I just prefer Coco coir. We can see how light, fluffy, and airy this mix is. That's super important for container gardening, right? It helps make sure that the water is evenly distributed, and it also makes sure that the roots can push their way through. We're gonna get to actually putting our mix into the pot or the container. I like to start with a thin layer of compost on the bottom. We just spoke about how light and fluffy it is. Why would I want to compact it down? Compacted dirt's harder for the roots to grow. Whenever we're putting things in containers, you do not want the top of the plant or the top of the root ball to be higher than your container. If that was the case, whenever we watered it, all of the water would just run down out of the pot. What I like to do is to leave about 1 inch or so gap between the top of the root ball and the top of the container. So I'm talking about, I want it to be about here or so. Why do I do this? Well, this is to ensure that whenever I water, the water stays in the container and has time to work its way down. That way you can make sure that everything is adequately watered and there are no dry spots. So now it's time to plant. When it comes to removing a tree out of these nursery pots, I know some people like to cut it. Me, I like to reuse the pots. So I do what my dad did when I was younger. He would tap the sides. Tapping the sides helps loosen the soil from the container. Turn it upside down. After I have the tree where I want it, I'll come back and stake it to get it to grow straight. I have the mycorrhiza around the root ball. And then I come back and backfill with the soil. Draw the stem, try to find the top of the root ball. You see this is that level that I was talking about. Now I'm gonna come with a thin layer of compost on top of this. We come back, we add our granular fertilizer around this, and we water it in. We're not just gonna sprinkle it on the top. What we're gonna do is work it into the top 3 inches of the soil. So, bring it around, make a nice ring around the tree. Just make sure that you give the tree sufficient water. Remember those drainage holes we put in the bottom? That makes it extremely hard to overwater this tree. That's why it is so important to make sure you have drainage holes. So you'll notice that when you initially started to water the tree, the water was quickly absorbed by the potting mix. See? But now, you'll notice that it starts to pool up. A little tip somebody gave me and a trick that I've been using for a long time is if this water stays pooled up for 3 to 5 seconds, that's how I know that the plant has been sufficiently watered. If when I water it, it is instantly absorbed, that means that I need to continue to water the pot. So let's check that out. Quickly absorbed on this side. Could use some more water over here. But when I come over here, notice it takes longer for the water to get down. That means that this area of your pot has received enough water. Remember, we're trying to make sure that we evenly saturate the soil so that there are no dry spots in our pot. After watering the tree, you'll probably notice the next day that the level of soil has dropped a little bit. And just like that, that's how easy it is to plant a fruit or citrus tree in a container.